So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for spending the morning with me. I'm honored that you have chosen to be with us at this roundtable discussion. My name is Karen Phillip, and I work at the Caribbean Policy Development Center, and in partnership with MCII and Volunteer United, we put together this discussion to speak about climate and disaster risk financing and insurance. But before we officially start, I just want to hear who's in the room. So if you could take turns just saying your name and the organization that you're from. I'm going to ask Victoria and Elijah to go later in it so that y'all could tell us more about Volunteer United and MCII. And we don't need to put on the video. I just wanted you all to put a face to the voice that's going to be speaking to you for the next 2.5 hours.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Janet Simon. I am the Vice President of Internal Affairs for GCI Antigua.
Okay, very nice to meet you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Simone, representing CYE in Antigua.
Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Calvin H. Thornhill, Vice President of JCI Antigua External, which basically deals with community development.
Okay. Thanks for being here today, Calvin.
Yeah, morning. My name is Mario Bento with the Rotary Club of Antigua Sundown and also the Antigua and Barbuda Waste Recycling Corporation.
Thanks for being here, Mario.
Good morning, Patrice Simon with the Antigua and Barbuda Hotels and Tourism Association.
Nice to meet you, Patrice.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Wilson. I'm representing the Environmental Awareness Group.
Nice to meet you, Nathan. We had one of your colleagues, I think, do one of our workshops a few years back. It's good to be still in touch with the Environmental Awareness Group.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Jennifer Phillips here with the Munich Climate Insurance Initiative.
Thanks for being here.
Good morning. This is Ariane Nicholas, representing the Insurance Association of Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you for being here. Are we missing anyone?
Hi, good morning. My name is Michael Joseph. I'm with the Halo Foundation, Generation Y, the Governor General's Wife's Foundation.
Okay. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Saren King, and I'm representing the Antigua and Barbuda Network of Rural Women Producers, which is an agro-processing group, and it's a chapter of CANRAP, the Caribbean Network of Rural Women Producers and Processors.
Thank you for being here.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Jones. I am officer in charge at the Caribbean Policy Development Center. And I also want to thank you for being here with us this morning. And I hope that you are able to speak freely and we have a good exchange today on the program that we have scheduled for you. Have a good morning.
Thanks. I think you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Kenneth James. I'm representing NATIS, Natural Disturbance Information Systems, that's incubated at APSIP, Antigua and Barbuda Science and Innovation Park. Good to be here.
Okay. And then we have Christian. I haven't heard him as yet.
Hi, good morning. I'm Christian, representing Caribbean Policy Development Center.
Okay. And then I think we got everybody. So Elijah could go ahead.
Hey everyone, Thanks for turning out this morning. Antigua and Barbuda looks well represented. So my name is Elijah James. I'm Executive Director of Volunteers United. Looking forward to an amazing and engaging discussion, and also building on the MAPS partnership that is running to achieve.
Yeah, and then we have Victoria.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Victoria. I'm also with MCII, like my colleague Jennifer Phillips. And at first, big thank you to CPDC, Karen and Richard and other colleagues for organizing the kickoff workshop. And I'm just going to briefly talk a bit about MCII. So we're the Munich Climate Insurance Initiative. We have been founded in 2005 in Munich, which is how the Munich gets into our name, and been founded by representatives from the private sector, academia, and civil society. And we are hosted by the United Nations University Institute for Environment and Human Security in Bonn. And as an organization, we are working on the development of climate risk insurance solutions within the broader context of climate risk management. So while insurance is in our name, the approach that we're taking and the work that we're doing is much broader than just insurance. We are sort of we're basing our work on three elements. The one is research and analytics, which very much looks into the assessment of climate risks and the identification of adaptation as well as risk financing options such as insurance to address risks. That's the analytic work. Then the second section focuses on product development and implementation. That is the team that my colleague Jennifer is with, which looks into specific needs of partner countries or target groups when it comes to insurance, and tries and promote needs-based insurance solutions, as well as to implement them within the broader national contexts, which are different in each country. And then lastly, we have a division which works on policy and international engagement on climate and disaster risk finance and risk management, and that is the team that I'm with. And that is also sort of where the work around the InsuResilience Global Partnership, which is also a context for this multi-actor partnership that we are working on together with the CPDC is based. And I think with that, I would hand it over to Karen to explain a bit more, I guess, about the actual content of the project for which we're here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that brief introduction. Everyone, I really am grateful that you're here today. Just some little ground rules for engagement. We're going to try to keep the mics and the videos off in order to reduce the chances of overcrowding the network and then having to bounce off. Questions can be submitted in the chat, and then they will be given at the end of the first session. And then we're just asking for everybody to be respectful of others' opinions and positions. So I have a quick quiz for you all. It's really short, and I hope that everybody sees it. Yesterday, not everyone was able to see the polls, but it's a simple 4-question poll that should be up on your screen now. Anyone is seeing it, or? Oh yes, we've started to vote. Okay, good. Right, so everybody should be able to see the results. We all agree that the frequency of natural disasters have increased, that our country has suffered great economic loss to climate change, and that my country should take a proactive approach to planning and disaster events. That's great. That means y'all are definitely in the right discussion. I am aware of climate insurance schemes available in the Caribbean. The minority said that they agree, and the majority said that they're not aware, which still means y'all are in the right session. So let's move on to a quick overview. Right, so this project is talking about climate and disaster risk financing insurance, which has two aims: to help persons and countries to have proactive planning and building resilience. It is part of the InsuResilience Global Partnership, which is a multi-stakeholder partnership which brings together representatives from the G20 and the B20 countries, civil society, private sector, and academia. So you would hear that when everybody was doing introductions, it was different groups of people coming together, right? And it's working towards increasing access to climate disaster risk finance insurance solutions to up to 500 million people by 2025. And it takes a principled stand and a gender-sensitive approach. And for this project, CPDC is working with 3 amazing organizations in 3 amazing Caribbean countries, being Barbados, Grenada, and Antigua. So what has been the impacts of disaster in the region? We've seen an increase of hurricanes, excessive rainfall, and we just had the notice come out that Kickham Journey is being active again, which means they're telling us to be on alert for even more earthquakes. And while we do understand that some of these changes have been caused by the mismanagement of the resources we have as humans, some of them are also based on natural disasters, natural creations. So what have we faced in the Caribbean in recent time? And we've seen that at the beginning we had not in the beginning, but when I started to track this when it comes to the climate disaster risk finance, I-1 in 2024 destroyed 90% of Grenada homes, 16 deaths, and over 8 million US in damages financially. And after I-1 was the development of the CRIF, which was the first multi-country insurance risk pool that governments could use to help rebuild. And since then, we've had Hurricane Maria in 2017, Irma in 2017, all of these destroying more than 90% of the buildings. And I'm sure y'all could give us stories of how Irma affected your family and your livelihoods and everything else. And then in Trinidad, we also had excessive rainfall that affected 80% of the country. So with these events, we see that it's not only just a one-off, hurricane season, things are happening, but instead we have droughts. The FAO defines countries like Barbados and Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis as water scarce, which of course is going to give us, it's going to have a domino effect with our ability to provide food, our ability to be a food secure society, and all these other things. Farmers in particular are vulnerable to the drought as their livelihoods are threatened by the low rainfall, where crops aren't being able to be produced due to the access to the low water. And then also our oceans are also being affected, and we see massive damages being caused to the coral reef that lead to losses in fish production. But in this context, we want to talk about what is being covered by climate disaster risk finance insurance. So we have the heavy rain and the excessive rainfall. And we've had that in Trinidad, we've had that in St. Lucia, and I think a few other countries, which of course leads to the flooding, the heat wave, the dry spells, the droughts, and our tropical cyclones hurricane season. And we know that they are predicting that this one is going to be the busiest ever. I think we've already gone to 3 names already, and the hurricane season started this month. Yeah, and then for non-climate related natural hazards would be earthquakes, volcanoes, and tsunami. So how does this impacts around the globe really affect? So we could see that it doesn't only just affect us, it affects the whole world, South America, Africa, Asia, and all these places. But when you look at the numbers for the Caribbean, it's quite overwhelming if we understand where the resources that we have and how strained it is and how much longer it would take us to rebuild. And we need to be able to rebuild better. And then also another finding found is that the deaths in the developing countries are higher than in the others. So if you look at this graph for 2018, in South America, we have 144 deaths, or 164 in Australia, but in America we have 800, right? So this is saying that over 95% of natural disaster related deaths occurred in developing countries. And that is to me very overwhelming. And it talks about a need to do something to address this. So I have another quick poll for you. It's only 3 questions. Right, so we see that 81% says that the change in weather patterns have impacted our livelihood. So that confirms also what I just reported on, that these things are having a great impact on our countries. I have suffered financial losses because of the prevalence of natural disasters. And once again, we have the majority saying that, yes, this is true. So that means that even when we are doing the stats, we have to be mindful that it's not only just what the government has faced, but what the individuals have faced. And I often prepare for the hurricane season before June. Majority of us said yes. So I'm going to pick your brains about the way that you all prepare shortly. But okay, so I want to hear from you for a minute now. How do you think that a country could become more resilient to these climate disasters? If we could hear from 3 persons, that would be great.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Janet Simon from JCI Antigua again.
Okay.
I believe that one of the most integral ways that a country can be more resilient to these disasters would be to enforce strict housing measures, how individuals build their houses, provide loans and grants so that these individuals who are poverty struck, they can in some way access funding to be able to have proper housing, because when a natural disaster strikes, one of the major losses would be from housing.
Yeah, definitely. So you're saying them to provide the grants so that they could build better, or provide the grants so that they could rebuild better?
Provide the grounds that they can build better, because this is more of a proactive measure than a reactive one.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else?
Hi, good day.
Good day.
Okay. I think that one of the other ways, to join my colleague, I do completely agree. I also think that one of the greatest mechanisms is for government to be more understanding of the risks that are faced by their countries and to put in place mechanisms to mitigate against these risks. And some of these do include, for example, housing, but also the aspect of livelihoods, which a lot of individuals suffer. For example, with the COVID-19, we see how, something like COVID-19 has, pretty much destroyed our tourism sector, and hurricanes and other disasters, do exactly the same. And I think that there has to be mechanisms in place like insurance that help people to be able to bounce back a lot quicker. And this in itself makes the society more resilient. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Colin, I see you raised your hand.
Yes, good morning, everybody. What my two colleagues said is really great. I just wanted to add to that to say that we have suffered a major issue of enforcement. There are building codes out there, many great practices for green building and approach to resilience, but when it comes down to the enforcement of these recommendations, it is a problem. So we have to strengthen enforcement and measurement to monitor how well these plans that we are talking about are actually implemented. That is a major shortfall in the building industry.
Thank you. So from what I'm hearing, you're on target or in alignment with the ODI, and they're saying in order to have resilience, you need to be able to anticipate, you need to absorb, and you need to adapt. So they call it the 3 A's, but when I see it, I think of a AAA battery, and that they want us to become an energizer bunny that could keep going, that could bounce back, and that could be able to build better, to measure what needs to be done to adjust ourselves, right? So to anticipate is the ability to estimate the impact of the weather events on individuals and countries, and the response measure and course required to adequately address these impacts. So that goes back to what was said, talking about we need to have enforcement, we need to have loans to ensure that persons could build properly, and that we need to see beforehand, you also have to do it before June, you'll prepare for the hurricane season. But then we also have to be able to absorb. So to absorb is the ability to cope with the impact of extreme weather events and absorb the effects. So what's going to happen when we have the flooding and we lose all the furniture in the living room? How are we going to cope with this? And then how are we going to adapt afterwards to moderate or to mitigate the harm? So we learned that if they say flooding is coming, to get the sandbags and all these other things, but what other steps could we take? So I want you all to remember the 3 A's: anticipate, absorb, and adapt. So when we put this in the context of proactive planning and resilience, we see that we want us to take risk assessments, that we want to anticipate what are the potential damages of these natural hazards. But then we also want to protect what we have. So we want to improve the financial liquidity, which goes back to the loans, and reduce the distress of asset sales and increasing food security. And we know how much food security is an issue for us in the region, and enabling rapid recovery, because the longer you take to recover, the harder it is for you to rebuild, or you may just be unable to rebuild and you will have to start all over somewhere else. But also we need to be able to adapt. So we need to promote savings. We need to ensure that we have an emergency fund, both national and individually. We need to increase productivity and investment on higher return activities and improving the credit worthiness of persons. And we also need to spur on transformation. We need to ensure that risk reduction behaviors are rewarded, and that we need to foster a culture within our countries to focus on prevention measures rather than recovery measures. So all of this fits into a bigger plan called the Integrated Climate and Disaster Risk Management. I need you all to remember this as well, that all of this is part of a bigger thing called the Integrated Climate and Disaster Risk Management. And I'm just going to touch on it, but we're going to dig into it much later on in a greater detail. So we have the prevention, retention, transfer, preparedness, response, and recovery. So when we put these things together, we are able to not only just address one issue, but we're able to have a holistic view of how to look at weather events and how to respond to them. So how does climate disaster risk finance insurance help us? Just another big long acronym that these people come in to talk to us about. So with the extreme events on a rise, especially in developing countries, they produce severe setbacks. And then right now we tend to see that all of our responses are ad hoc. They're one-off and they're not necessarily giving us a proper program to respond to. So if we have these measures in place, we can enhance the availability of resources and also the timely deployment and support the countries in better planning risk and including preventative risk reduction and coordination for disaster response. So where do we come into all of this? This is where I talk about the project. So the project is funded by the German government, and it aims to reduce the negative impact of disaster and climate change on vulnerable groups in selected developing countries through the use of poverty-oriented and human rights-based climate and disaster risk measures in the context of InsuResilience Global Partnership. So let's give a bigger picture of what the InsuResilience Global Partnership is. The vision of the partnership is to strengthen the resilience of the developing countries and to protect the lives and the livelihoods of the poor and the vulnerable from the impacts of climate shocks and disaster by enabling faster and more reliable and cost-effective response. As an interactive, inclusive global partnership community, the partnership links the needs with solutions, coordinates and implements the efforts, and share learning and best practices, integrates and aligns risk financing with broader climate and resilience policy agendas, seeks to amplify the impact of ongoing initiatives and development of new climate and disaster risk finance and solutions to help meet the growing needs of developing countries. So what we're aiming to do is to create a multi-stakeholder partnership on the national and regional levels and the global levels to promote development that is gender-based, poverty-oriented, and human rights-based approach to climate finance. So once again, you'll understand that why in the room we have the farmers, we have the hotel people, we have civil society. We want everyone to be able to come together and figure out what suits best for our country. So we're looking to establish the maps in each country, facilitating exchange among project countries. And we also want to take your voices and carry it to the position policy, but these positions to the policy maker. So CPDC believes that anything that is happening in the Caribbean should have the voice of the people in it. And this is where it comes into alignment, that we want to ensure that whatever is being produced, whatever is being implemented in the region actually helps the region. And we also want to increase the capacities among the CSO partners. So this project is being implemented, it's funded by the German government, implemented by CARE Germany with German Watch and the MCII. And it's also in 7 other countries. So it's in the Caribbean, Laos, Madagascar, Malawi, Philippines, Senegal, and Sri Lanka. And we're looking to develop a toolkit that can help persons understand how to use this, that how it can be practical, and also how they could lobby with their governments. And we also want to produce research projects based on gender, global policies, and humanitarian systems, and influence the global and regional policy processes. And we want to ensure that we learn from other persons in other parts of the region, so between Asia, Africa, and Caribbean. And we also want to have stakeholder meetings, kind of like this one, and also contribute to other working groups throughout the world. So who are our target group? Who are we really looking at? So for civil society, we're looking at civil society, and then we're also looking at the relevant partners throughout. Who will be interested will be the insurance agencies, the private sector, the universities, and civil society. But then we don't want to just leave it in here. We want to take it to everyone in the country. We want to ensure that Antigua and Barbuda has improved because of this project. So what exactly is climate disaster risk finance and insurance? So let me hear from three persons. How do you prepare for the hurricane season? Go ahead, John. I'm sorry, Colin.
Just prepare family checklist. Very simple, but sits now noting the things that we would need to do from experience and just making sure you have everything accounted for.
Okay, all right, go ahead, Janet.
For me, I focus on mostly my house to ensure that the shutters are well intact, that the roof also is intact, ensure that I go to the hardware store and pick up any necessary materials needed to just ensure that my home is secure in the event of a serious hurricane.
Okay. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is George Philip from Grenada. I came on a little late, but I am in agriculture. And so what we do for bananas, we would ensure that the banana trees are propped properly so that heavy winds would not knock them over easily. We would plant crops that are on the ground so that the wind and the rain would not affect them as the crops that are over the ground. And these are some of the things, ensure that the animals, the cages and the housing for animals are secured, and you have enough animal feed so that you can carry through if there is the incident of rains or storms or things like that. So these are some of the things that we do in relation to agriculture.
Thanks for sharing, George. So when I hear from three people, what happens after a hurricane? Is there any preparation that has to pass after hurricane season?
Well, again, in agriculture, what we do, we go out through the country after the hurricane has passed, and we would do a guesstimation, of the damage, and for that's within the first 24 hours, do a guesstimation of the damage, and relate it to our policymakers, our ministries, and things like that, and later on, we go and do a real evaluation of the real damage. So, again, it's just a matter of evaluating what has happened, what has occurred.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Calvin?
For after the hurricane has passed, of course, you check to see the safety of your house, see if it's still intact. You clean up the debris, you assist your neighbors. You get an initial analysis of what really took place before, after the hurricane, in terms of damages, deaths, etc. and then you document that, and then you go on from there.
Thank you. All right, so we'll go ahead, Davon. Davon, you had your hand raised? I think we lost them. Okay, so as we see, they have some similarities in preparing for a hurricane and after the hurricane. So in disaster risk financing, we have finance that occurs before the event, the risk reduction. So we heard and making sure everything is intact. Yeah? Hello?
Yes, I was unable to communicate. Are you still wanting to hear from me?
Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Okay, yes. So what I was going to suggest that we do after a storm, what I normally do is I do an assessment of my home physically first. Then I would assist the neighbors assessing our neighborhood. And then we venture further to look, to try and do quick assessments and stuff like that. Because of my involvement in both agriculture and fisheries, I would then set up some linkages between myself and other people affiliated to both agriculture and fisheries. We get together and then we try to do simple assessments to see what damages would have taken place to both the agriculture sector and the fisheries sector. Then ensure that the supplies that you would have gathered by previous preparation are still intact, and look to see the time frame with regards to the supplies that you would have prepared. So those are some of the basic things that we do from our end here in Barbuda.
Okay. Thank you for that contribution. And we can see from all who have spoken that you really still have to spend money and you still have to spend time before and after an event. So I was saying that before the event, we have risk reduction, which is getting everything intact, knowing what we're going to plant. We have risk transfer, trying to see what we have to secure from the insurance agencies, and then forecast-based financing. And also after the event, we have risk retention and risk finance. So let's dig a little deeper. So in risk reduction, madam who have everything intact to make sure her stress is working, she knows she have to put money aside to afford this. The same way the governments need to know that they need to put money aside because hurricane season coming up. So they need to have public-private partnerships. They need to work with the development partners. They need to work with the banks, the IDB, and all the regional banks as well. So for the risk transfer, right now in Antigua, we only have insurance for hurricanes and stuff, not the parametric as yet. So you try to get that insurance if you could afford it, while the governments also look for insurance. And then also, my friend said that he does a guesstimate. These people are saying maybe we should do a guesstimate before. So we're forecasting what may happen if this event happens and being able to plan accordingly. And then after the event, we have risk retention. And this is when the disaster people come in and they try to help us rebuild the funds and change the budget. We could no longer afford to go on a cruise for Christmas. We need to spend the money to help rebuild. And this is what the governments as well sometimes have to do. They have to change the budget around to ensure that they could provide and recover as best as possible. And then we have risk finance, which talks about post-financing instruments that help build and rebuild as well. So these are loans and grants from other development partners that the governments could have access to. So this is just a quick snapshot of how it should work, how quickly, if you get quicker finance, you will be able to recover in a shorter time. And other considerations that we need to take in is the timeliness, the cost of it, the ability to account the dispersal mechanisms, the risk layering, risk information and audits, and the risk ownership. right? But now we want to hear from you. So I want to put you all into working groups, breakout rooms. I believe we have 20 persons. So you all can take a quick write down of these questions. We want to hear what you all are doing. What is your work? What role does climate risk play in it? And how are these risks being addressed in your work? And I'll give you 10 minutes. Hi, so everyone should be back in the main room now. Yes. Are you hearing me now, Louise?
Yes, I am hearing you.
Okay, great. So we're going to hear from the breakout rooms now about what is your work, what is your role climate risk plays in it, and how are climate risk being addressed, right? So we're going to start with breakout room 1, which had Bernard, Calvin, Janet, Mario, and Nathan.
Did you want to hear from each of us, or you wanted one of us to represent the group?
One of you to represent.
Oh boy, I should have took notes then. Anyway, okay, so we had Nathan. He is with the Environmental Awareness Group, and he told us about some of the environmental issues that his group would monitor and address before and after natural disaster. Janet is a teacher, and Janet explained the importance for them in schools to provide education to the children, which eventually gets passed on to the parents in the home about hurricane preparedness and responding to a disaster. Calvin is with the Coast Guard. He has a dangerous job. He comes out during the eye of the hurricane to check on things and see what can be done best to protect lives and property. And obviously he has a busy job afterwards in a disaster.
Yeah.
And finally, we had Bernard, who is with the Ministry of Social Transformation and also head of the Disabilities Association. I do know Bernard. So I know he's quite active in advocating for access for the physically challenged. And obviously that's a very important role normally, but even prior to a disaster and after disaster, safe access obviously is even more important.
Definitely.
I think I got it. Oh, sorry, and myself. So yes, I am in the water treatment business as a profession. So obviously we get quite busy in preparedness before with our wastewater treatment plants, desalination plants. And then afterwards, we get back into these facilities, try to get them up and running as quickly as possible. On my Rotary hat, it's also a very busy time for us in Rotary because after disaster, we try to reach out internationally to other Rotary clubs and district organizations to raise funding, report on the extent of damage in our country, in our region, and try to collaborate with as much international effort as we can to start doing some local community-based relief projects.
Okay, that's great. All right, so let's hear from breakout room 2. That's Elijah, Davon, George, and Ariane.
Ariane, you want to go?
Whoever zip line. These cards are usually good, but the only thing, right, you can't be on the phone when you're charging. So if those kids use it to charge their phone, tell them just put it on and let the phone charge because the pin is kind of sensitive. So you can't.
I think you need to move
Marvin's
phone.
Yeah, I'm trying to mute. Okay, I think that was a mistake. Yeah. Okay, you can go ahead, Elijah.
Sure. So we had Ariane, who is an insurance broker. And so in terms of getting her clients, the public set up for disaster seasons, in terms of making sure that they have adequate coverage in the event of a disaster or some kind of damage. There was George, who's a farmer, and of course preparing his crops and making sure that they are secured better prior to a disaster is one of the activities that he does in terms of trying to deal with the issue of climate risk. And we have, before we dropped out to the call, back to up on the breakout room, who is a fisherman, and in terms of pull out into the sessions.
Okay. Thanks for sharing. So then we have, hello? That was it, right? Okay. So then we have breakout room 3. Candace, Colin, Michael, Cuthbert.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I could hear you.
Okay, so there is myself. I am an architect, project manager, and a sustainable development consultant. So my focus was really discussing how climate resilience can be built into building development. And I was talking particularly about a project that we did for the OECS focus on disaster resilient manuals, especially for shelters and schools. There were Candice, he is someone that's dealing with software development and so on, which focuses on early detections, for example, like the sargassum seaweed and other such systems that can be built in. And of course, we also had Cuthbert and Michael Joseph, who they are representing the HALO Foundation, which deals with altruism and philanthropic work. And they're looking at a project to assist persons with affordable housing and climate resilient housing, working along with Prince Charles and Calvin Ayre Foundation, which I think was very interesting. So we had a really good session looking at software development and philanthropic work together to look at climate change and climate resilience.
That sounds like a very interesting conversation. Thanks for sharing. And so last but not least would be Saran and Victoria.
Sure. Saran, do you wanna recap, or should I go?
You can go ahead.
All right. Okay. Feel free to add when I'm done. All right. So our group was two people. Was Saran and myself. Saran works with the Antigua and Barbuda network of rural women producers and processors, and I work with MCI, as I explained before. So basically, the work of MCI sort of centers on climate risk, whereas Saran's work is basically working with and coordinating an agro processing group, especially a women's group. And the objective of the organization that she is working with is to empower rural women through work in the agro processing sector. And that would include the processing of food items and manufacturing from, let's say, food produce, such as jams, or such as manufacturing things into jams, to also making necklaces and so on and so forth from seeds. With regards to the role that climate risk plays for our work, as I said, with regards to MCI, the risk is basically the one of the central components within our work, whether we're advising or trying to work with partners increasing risk management capacities, or whether we're working with partners on looking for options to design risk insurance approaches of climate change. For Saran's work, the role that climate risk plays in her work is that, obviously, since they are based in the agricultural sector, climate risks play quite a big role. So hurricanes have quite a detrimental effect, but also droughts, which affects the production of the produce and then leads to supply chain interruptions. And with regards to how climate risks are being addressed as part of our work, again, MCI is working in different fields. So for one, we would address climate risks through in-depth work on risk assessments when it comes to vulnerability and exposure, but also when it comes to sort of advising on potential adaptation or risk financing options that could be done to address those risks. And with regards to Saran's work, I think one point that you mentioned, Saran, is that it's quite hard, obviously, to address climate risks if one is in the middle of the supply chain, and to shield or protect against that. And Saran, please feel free to add anything in case I forgot something. Thank you.
That it was quite accurate. I don't think I have anything else to add to what you said.
Okay, so that's great. So we all see that this is not something only affecting farmers, but it's affecting all of us in one way or the other. And it is affecting our loved ones as well. And we need to take steps to be more proactive in planning. And from that, I'm going to segue into handing over to Jennifer to tell us a bit more about the lessons learned from from being in the Caribbean and providing and providing climate disaster risk and finance insurance in the region.
Yeah, happy to, Karen. So thank you so much for the introduction. As Karen was saying, MCAI has worked on a project called the Climate Risk Adaptation and Insurance in the Caribbean project. And this project was led by MCAI together with CRIF SPC, who works to ensure sovereign governments in the Caribbean and in Central America, as well as working together with ILO's Impact Insurance Facility, Munich Re, the reinsurer, and DHI, which is a risk modeler who helped us in developing the insurance product. And so if we go to the next slide, you'll see that this project is taking place in 5 different Caribbean countries, including Jamaica, St. Lucia, Grenada, Trinidad, Tobago, and Belize. And going to the next slide, basically what we aim to do in this project is, first of all, to raise awareness and understanding on climate risk insurance, specifically what it is and the different forms that exist. And this includes conducting trainings and awareness raising on the type of insurance that we work with and the type of insurance that CRIF SPC works with, which is called index-based or parametric insurance. And this is the type of insurance where instead of having somebody come to your house or your building or institution to look at the damage after an event, it's an insurance payout that is determined based on different types of indices like rainfall and wind speed in our case. And so the second objective in our project is to develop these types of micro index-based insurance products. One of the ones that we have developed is called the Livelihood Protection Policy, and this was implemented in Jamaica and St. Lucia. And basically what this was an insurance policy that individuals or cooperatives could purchase that would pay out within 2 weeks after an extreme weather event occurred. And as part of our work, it's always important then to conduct research on how these types of insurance products affect individuals, how they can help them recover, and how it impacts their response and recovery time. And to do this, we also work together with UN FCCC's and framework to bring these lessons learned into the international dialogue. And so if we go to the next slide, I'll explain a bit more about how this type of climate risk insurance works. So as I was previously mentioning, index insurance is different from your traditional property insurance, where payouts are determined by amount of rainfall or amount of wind speed, and not by the amount of damage received. And this type of insurance has the advantage in that traditional property insurance is typically very expensive, and insurers have to pay a lot of money after an event occurs to send out a loss adjuster or claims handler to a person's property to look at the damage. And because of this high cost, it often prohibits a lot of persons from accessing insurance. With index-based insurance, right after we know that there has been, for example, a hurricane that has come through that island and high wind speeds of up to 80 miles per hour have been reached, that there is an insurance payment necessary because the index has been reached. And so when individuals decide to purchase the insurance policy, for example, in the case of Jamaica, as we see in the presentation, they would put down where they live, for example, in St. Elizabeth. And then what we do is we use satellite data to monitor what the rainfall and wind speed levels are. And this data is collected every 24 hours. So when there's a storm or a trough that's passed through the island and we know that there's been a significant amount of rainfall, so much that it reaches the index, which typically starts around 70 miles per hour for wind, for example, then we know that a payout should be made to the individual. And with this data then that's sent to the direct insurer on the island, the direct insurer then sends the insurance payout directly into the bank account of the policyholder within a 2-week period. And it's our hope that with this type of insurance policy that people then don't have to depend on borrowing money, which will be difficult if everyone on the island is affected, or waiting for government assistance, which can sometimes take very long in order to come, and will not have to use up all of their savings. So if we go to the next slide. Here we can see a couple of examples when there has been payouts. First of all, in St. Lucia back in 2013 and 2014, as well as when Hurricane Matthew came through in 2016. Many of the smallholder farmers that purchased the insurance product then received a payout within this 2-week period. Also in Jamaica in 2017-18, there has been a couple of rainfall events that triggered a payout that was then sent to these individuals. It's important to note that with this type of insurance, how the payouts are determined is based on the rainfall and wind speed level. So for example, if there's wind speeds at 40 miles per hour, this wouldn't be high enough for an insurance product to trigger, even though somebody might experience damage. And so when we go forward with selling these types of insurance products, it's very important to educate people on how this insurance works, and that just because you receive damage, sometimes because a very old tree, for example, fell over, it wouldn't automatically mean that you get a payout, because the payout is determined based on the actual wind speed amount and rainfall. So go into the next slide. Yeah. So I'll give an overview of the different lessons learned that we've received so far in the implementation stage of this project. The first is the one that I just spoke to you about, this financial literacy, and needing to explain how this type of insurance is different from the traditional forms that people are familiar with. And if you have the expectation that whenever you receive a bit of damage that you'll get an automatic payout, then you will of course be very disappointed and not want to purchase the insurance. And so we need to make sure to educate people that this type of insurance is for the extreme cases, and it's not the type that will pay out every couple of months. This wouldn't be a sustainable product, but it's more for those really big events where half the island is very heavily affected and it can take a long time for people to recover. Also important, going to the next point on the basis risk to explain this concept. And basis risk just refers to this risk that occurs when you experience damage and you don't get a payout. And this is something that's just part of this type of insurance scheme. And it can also occur in the opposite side where, for example, your house was so well protected that even though a big storm came through, you didn't have any damage at all, and you could receive a payout because that's just the way the insurance policy works, and the satellite data says that there was a big storm. So it's very important that we communicate this so people will understand how this product can be used. And along with that, going down to the point below it on the disaster risk management, explaining how this type of insurance isn't meant to be a solution for everything. It's not a silver bullet, but it's one tool that can be used to help people respond quicker, but it shouldn't be used in isolation. And the more people do protect themselves and take their own preparedness measures to reduce their risk exposure, the more likely it will be then that they won't have to use any type of insurance payout for damages, but can just use it for their own recovery needs. And on the bottom left-hand side, we talk also about the parametric models that should be always further developed as we are able to acquire new data. Through new satellite data that's being collected, we can then create more advanced products that can be better suited for the needs of individuals. And so going to the next slide. Yeah, here we want to talk about the actual product design. In the case of St. Lucia and in Jamaica, we started with one type of product that could be sold in different units. And so one unit of insurance would cost you 100 Eastern Caribbean dollars in St. Lucia, for example, and people could buy up to 10 units, depending on what they saw as their risk need. This type of product was easy then for the insurers to explain to many different groups of people. However, the disadvantage of this approach is that different groups have different risk profiles and different needs. So while this product might have been attractive for banana farmers who are highly affected by both wind and rain, for other types of groups, for example, fishermen, they might have a different type of needs in mind, specifically looking at amounts of wave, for example, wave heights that were not met by this type of product. And so going forward, we want to look into developing differentiated products that will include different types of risk in them. Along with this, we also saw that although we really want this product to be affordable for everyone, there's certain groups that will not be able to afford these market-based mechanisms. And that's why we want to make sure to talk to governments about the role that social protection can play and how this type of insurance product can help to enhance social protection, because some of the lower income groups, they're often the ones hardest hit by these events, and they don't have the means to purchase market-based insurance products. And so for them to receive extra support after such an event would really help them in recovering more quickly. Also, we want to talk about how we can better work with distribution channels. Purchasing insurance products needs to be made easily done and accessible for individuals, because it's not very feasible for everyone to drive to their local insurance office every month to pay their premium. So we need to work with different distribution channels to make sure that payments can be made easily by the policyholders. And one other way to do this then would be the group policies too, where you sell policies through an association, organization, cooperative, who could then facilitate the collection of premiums and payouts if necessary. And then for the last points, the last slide. Yeah. And so as we go forward with this project, what we want to make sure we do is working then to build partnerships with NGOs and governments, specifically on these points of education and raising awareness on it. This really helps with lowering the cost of insurance, because what insurers will often need to do then is put a higher amount of cost onto the insurance product if they have to spend a lot of money on marketing and advertising. And so if we're able to partner with different organizations who work in the area of disaster risk reduction and disaster risk management,
I think we're losing you a bit.
How these products work and who could benefit from them. This will work with groups so that we can answer the needs of these different groups, as well as looking into how digital solutions can play a role in collecting premiums and distributing payouts, so that this wouldn't have to be done with a face-to-face encounter, which can be very expensive because then it requires a regulated insurance person to sell it. But if it can be done online or through mobile phones, then this will greatly decrease the cost. And then also, of course, is the partner buy-in. It's important for insurers also to see the benefit of this, because if not, what will often happen is when the insurance business gets difficult, it could be one of the products that they would cut if it's not of any benefit for them, or if it's of too high a cost to them. So we want to make sure that everyone in the relationship is benefited so that it has a long-term sustainable future. Happy to answer questions you guys have.
We have one question so far from Mario. Is the payout only 100% when exceeding the trigger level, or are there partial payouts for lower trigger levels?
Yeah, so the way it worked that we designed the first product is that there were 4 different trigger levels. So for example, in St. Lucia, it was the case that when wind speeds reached 67 miles per hour, this would be a trigger level 1, and this would lead to a 20% payout. When it reached up to 88 miles per hour, this was a 40% payout. 100 mile per hour winds was then a trigger 3, 75% payout, and then yeah, so on with wind speeds above 104 miles per hour. This was a 100% payout.
Okay, and you could go ahead, Devon.
Okay, yes. My question, statement is in regards to fisheries, because I realized that there was just a brief indication that the policy might be extended to fishers as well. I'm happy that you mentioned the possibilities of having these policies go through organizations or cooperatives once established. But the question is, has the policy been extended to fishers, and is there any examples of the policy working on behalf of fishers? If not, taking into consideration the struggle of fishers and the impacts climate change is having on fishers, how soon before we can see the policy being extended to fishers? Thank you.
So the way this policy was sold is that anyone on the island is allowed to purchase it, right? And we did in St. Lucia have the case that the Denari Fishermen Cooperative did purchase policies on behalf of their members. So this is always open and possible. You do find that there was a demand to have a product that would also incorporate wave height, because this is something that of course really affects the livelihoods of fishermen. And this is something that you've seen CRIF actually work on in the development of their coast project, which then actually addresses this issue of not only rainfall, but also wave height. And so as we move forward in our project, this is something that we also want to work to do in the market-based mechanisms. Yeah, but currently the rainfall wind speed products are available to everyone. So anyone who feels that this product could benefit them can purchase it.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I ask, how does the policy work? Let's take, for example, you purchase a policy and then there is a disaster, so you get a payout. What happens after? Does the policy just continue running, or you continue paying your premium, or what happens?
It's a great question. So basically the way it works is that you can get a 100% payout for each year that you purchase the policy. So for example, if I'm living in St. Lucia and I take out 1 unit of policy for $180, and maybe a trough comes through, and this triggers at level 2, which means I get a 40% payout. This means that if another trough comes through, I can get another payout for the other 60%. If, for example, within, it's always for a 1-year policy too that you purchase it. So $180 is for 1 year of coverage. If within the first 4 months, a category 4 comes through the island, this would give me a 100% payout. But this would mean that I would need to then pay for a new premium to then be eligible in case another hurricane came within that same year. Yeah. So once the 100% payout has been exhausted, then the policyholder would need to purchase a new premium. But if, for example, like the first hurricane came through in July, and then I purchased a new product afterwards in August, just in case another one came through, and it did come through another one in October, then you would still get another 100% payout.
Okay, we have another question. Is the trigger level different for different islands, or the same for each island?
Yeah, also a very good question. So in the case of St. Lucia, because it was a smaller island, we had different trigger levels for the north and the south, and this is because they receive different amounts of rainfall typically and wind speed. In the case of Jamaica, we did it based on the parishes. And so people would put down the parish they live in, and then they would get the information on what the trigger levels for their specific parish is. And this is just because in order to make the payouts fair for everyone, it has to correlate with the averages amounts of rainfall and wind speed for those different parts of the island.
Okay, any more questions? Calvin is asking a question as well. What exactly has to happen just now? What exactly has to happen for Antigua to be included? I'm assuming that would have to be as part of the policy.
Yeah, so for these insurance products to be introduced, as we move forward in the project, CRIF SPC is going to be playing a bigger role. And I know it's part of the goal for CRIF to be able to introduce such products all over the Caribbean. This is the long-term goal. To have it start happening, it has to do with creating partnerships with local insurers on the island, as well as working together with the government to get such products regulated. So I do think there is a goal for this to happen in the long-term strategy. It is a bit of a lengthy process though when it comes to then talking with governments and local insurers and local organizations to see how this can best be done.
Okay, and Colin has a question.
Actually, I have a few. First, I was asking about access to the financing, insurance. If it's totally online, you could go online. Would it be accessible at this time, even if the country on a whole hasn't really gone onto it wholesale? And the last one was, from your experience, what sort of payouts in terms of dollar figure has gone ahead, or if this is just something entirely new?
So on the first point, currently right now in the Caribbean, most of the regulations won't allow for online sales, and this is one of the points that we want to work with regulators. It's a bit risky, and the insurance regulators are there to protect people, right, from any type of potential misunderstanding. So if we are able to change the regulations so that it is possible to purchase insurance products digitally, and the country then regulates the product, it would be possible. But it first has to go through the official insurance regulation before that would be possible. As far as the payout amount, so in one of the previous slides, I talked about like the case of St. Lucia, where the policyholders received a total of 100,000 US in total for everyone. But if I give the example of if I had a policy for 100 EC dollars, if it was a strong storm that came through like a category 4, category 5, I would receive a 1,000 EC dollar payout then. Just to explain how that works. So the amount of payouts people receive is dependent on the severity of the storm. It's not the type of insurance product that would pay out every year. Of course, that would be unsustainable for the insurers, but a type of product that pays out for the big events so that when people most need the money, it's there.
Okay, thanks. We have Ariane has a question.
Hi, yes. You made mention of the various regulatory restrictions throughout the islands prohibiting persons being able to purchase the products online, etc., which I am aware of. But I'm not sure whether or not you're aware of the Uniform Insurance Bill that is being tabled before the various parliaments. My question is whether or not the conversations have started on any level of the scale with the necessary regulators to, advance the approval of this. If we're now looking at reviewing the act and reviewing all of the regulations, etc., I think this is the ideal time for those discussions to be held.
Thank you for that information. So I did not have the information on this regulation that was being introduced, and I would welcome any information that you could possibly send to Karen on this, because as you said, if it's possible to introduce the product on a wider scale like this, it would definitely be able to speed up processes then, as far as the ability to then introduce products.
Okay, will do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that piece of information. All right. I think we're going to close the question and answer time. I believe we have covered all the burning questions. Am I correct? Going once, going twice. Yes. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for your amazing presentation and for being with us this morning. And at this point, we're going to take a quick break, a water break, a bathroom break, and then we're going to come back. We're going to go for 5 minutes, and we will reconvene shortly.
No, it's not Skype, sorry, Zoom. Okay.
You could also take this time to fill out the attendance sheet. Christian put the link in the chat. All right, are we all back? We all had a drink of water, stretch your legs a little bit, and ready to move on to the next session. So we're going to play a little game to see who was listening best. How many of us know how to play Jeopardy? You could unmute your mics for this section. Are we back or are we not back as yet?
We're back.
We're back? All right. So it's going to be just a quick recap of what we just did earlier this morning. I'm just going to click and whoever wants to answer could answer. But, okay, so somebody will need to tell me which section y'all want me to start on.
Maps project for 100.
Okay, all right. The MAPS project is being funded by which European government?
Germany.
Correct is right. This international project is being implemented in how many countries?
7.
Woo, we have a star. Oh, sorry, I didn't click. Right, 7. Yeah. This German NGO strives for a world where vulnerable people can have access to and can afford protection against extreme weather. Is it CARE Germany? Is it German Watch? Is it MCII?
MCII.
Correct. Rockstar. A global multi-country program that seeks to strengthen the resilience of developing countries to the impact of climate shock and disaster. I kept tripping up on how to pronounce it. It's global. It has the countries from the G20 and the V20 in it.
What is InsuResilience Partnership?
All right, impacts for climate change. These countries have been identified as water scarce with less than 1,000 freshwater resources per capita. It was 3 countries that the FAO had identified.
Antigua, Barbuda, and someone else?
Yes, could somebody help her with the last one?
Grenada.
No.
St. Lucia.
It's a Saint, but not Lucia.
St. Vincent?
No.
St. Kitts.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
The ocean is experiencing change, which is causing damage to the coral reef. It's also called climate change evil twin. No one remembers?
Options, please.
Pardon? I didn't hear.
Options, please.
Option. When something it causes a bleaching out because it's very, we missed this one.
Acidification and temperature rise.
Yes, I was like environment. I was like, where's Nathan? But I don't want to pick on you. But I was like, where's you to give it. Thank you very much. Right. But wow, I don't know why this wig tripping me up so today. So that's something in developing countries. Fatalities. Fatalities are in developing countries. Remember we were saying when we look at it compared to the other regions, our region was?
It's higher, 95%.
Right, so it's higher. This extreme weather destroyed 90% of homes in Grenada.
Natural disaster hurricane.
Which natural disaster hurricane?
Begins with an I.
Yeah. In 2004.
What is Hurricane Ivan?
It wasn't Irma.
Ivan.
I think somebody just said it. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody said it.
Okay. These determinants of resilience are known as the 3 A's.
Adapt, absorb, anticipate.
Yes.
Yes.
The incorporation of climate and disaster risk finance insurance with other risk management approach is called? I told you all to remember this one because we're going to touch on it later.
CDRFI.
CDRFI is incorporated into something else, which gives it a holistic approach. It's integrated into
Climate and disaster risk management.
Great. This type of financing occurs before an event.
Pre-finance?
No, that's not the term that we use.
Ex ante. What is ex ante?
Yes. And last but not least, retention and risk finance relates to this type of financing. We just talked about ex ante. So what is the next one?
Post finance. Ex post finance.
Yes. Thank you very much. So I'm glad that y'all were listening. And now I want to hand over to Victoria to teach us more a bit about the integrated risk management approach.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. So I'll be presenting on behalf of my colleague, Kane Balogun, who has been working on integrated risk management, also helped to develop the concept that Karen introduced before, and also worked on the case study that I will be touching upon later in my presentation. She unfortunately can't be here today. But in case I can't answer some of the questions that you may have, I'll collect those. I'm very happy to collect those and hand them over to Kahinde and then get back to you with the answers. So on the next slide, brief overview of what to expect from this presentation. So we're going to see a relatively short video on integrated risk management, which again explains the concept a bit more in depth and gives a better overview of what it is in terms of its relevance for adaptation, as well as how it sort of works within the context of risk financing instruments such as insurance, but also savings and credit. And we're then gonna dive into the case study that we have prepared. Unfortunately, it's not a case study from the Caribbean, it's a case study from Morocco, but we decided to use that case study given that it focuses on MSMEs, especially in the agricultural sector, agro-processing MSMEs, which we thought might be of relevance or of interest to you as well. And it's also to better understand the integrated risk management concept. And that basically also covers the second point where we look into the different phases of the concept and then look at the gaps and sort of how those can be addressed with the introduction of insurance. And with that, I would go on to the next slide and ask you to enjoy the video that Karen will play in a second. It's about 6 minutes, so I hope it doesn't take up too much of your time.
Okay.
Thank you, Karen.
Meet Mia. Mia works as a small hotel owner, renting rooms to people who visit her town, known for its beautiful nature and fresh produce. However, life there is not...
Sorry?
The video doesn't run. We can hear it, but the picture doesn't move.
Oh, okay. Yesterday we had the other issue. Right,
yeah, I mean, we practiced even yesterday. It worked.
Not always easy, as her home is prone to hurricanes and flooding.
No, I think, nope, I don't think so.
Okay.
Sorry, let's try one more time, and if not, we have to use the same default as yesterday. Sorry for that.
The picture was moving on my screen.
Oh, it was? Okay. All right, let's just try one more time. We did try to practice this yesterday so that we wouldn't have this problem. All right, I have share.
Please meet Mia. Mia works as a small hotel owner, renting rooms to people who visit her town, known for its beautiful nature and fresh produce. However, life there is not always easy, as her home is prone to hurricanes and flooding. These natural hazards can greatly damage people's houses, businesses, and resources, and can even push them into a poverty trap. But it doesn't have to be like this. As the frequency and intensity of natural hazards continue to increase, more and more experiences have been made on how to increase resilience to these events with the help of insurance and other risk transfer instruments. To better protect Mia against possible natural hazards, there are 5 steps. 1. Risk prevention. 2. Addressing of residual risk. 3. Preparing. 4. Responding. And 5. Recovering. These steps are all part of a disaster risk management approach that integrates risk transfer solutions. 1. Prevention. The first thing that should be done to help prevent serious damage is a risk analysis, which identifies the hazards in a specific area and analyzes how exposed the people, businesses, agricultural fields, and infrastructure are. This analysis will reveal what can be done to prevent damage and feed into the risk transfer instruments and early warning systems in the next phases. In this area of prevention, Mia can strengthen her hotel and home with stronger materials to make them more resistant to wind. Her community can work together to plant trees, build a wall to protect farmland and infrastructure from heavy rain, or clean drainage systems to prevent flooding. The government can implement and enforce land use restrictions to ensure that people don't build in flood-prone areas. 2. Addressing residual risk. However, even if you put all preventive measures in place, some residual risk still remains. This is where ex-ante financing, that is, financing before a hazard strikes, can help. As an individual, Mia can take out a microinsurance policy in case her hotel is damaged. Weather index insurance could be a good option for the farmers in Mia's community, which will pay out when there has been too much or too little rain throughout the year. If Mia and her community do not manage these risks ex ante but ex post, that is, after a hazard strikes, then they will be forced to rely on friends and families, savings, or additional borrowings. The government can also protect their citizens with pre-disaster financing using contingent debt facilities, which ensure that funding will be available immediately after a hazard hits and by taking out their own insurance. This money can then be used to provide emergency relief to the people or support reconstruction. If governments plan how to manage the financial consequences of a natural hazard, they will not need to manage ad hoc and rely on donor assistance, additional taxes, budget shifts, or taking out credit from external actors. Implementing different prevention measures will greatly help in reducing the cost of these types of insurance and financial instruments because they significantly reduce the overall risk exposure. 3. Preparing. After Mia and her community protect themselves with ex-ante financing, they need to prepare themselves for the natural hazards. They can do this by stockpiling food and water in case of an emergency and making sure that they have a safe place to go should a flood or hurricane come their way. The government can also train individuals in rescue and emergency services, establish early warning systems, and come up with a contingency plan to ensure that everyone knows what to do. Adaptation investments, that is, investments made to help countries adapt to climate change, microcredit, and increasing savings, could also be good options for the government to better prepare. 4. Responding. When a natural hazard hits, Mia, her community, and the government enter the response phase. It is essential to respond quickly to avoid further loss of human life or material damage. They can do this by helping with the search and rescue effort, providing temporary shelter and food, and quickly repairing the most needed infrastructure. The ex-ante financing will play a big role in making this quick response possible. It may also be necessary to acquire some ex-post financing by increasing taxes, reallocating national budgets, or taking out credit. Without this financing, it can be very difficult for people and the government to get back on their feet. 5. Recovering. Now that Mia has responded to the first impacts of the disaster, she can start the recovery process. The good news is that with the right assistance, her savings, and possible payouts from her insurance, she can start to build back better. This can be done by examining the affected areas and repairing things in a smarter way that prevents these damages from happening again. All these steps are linked to each other and are most effective when countries and their governments, communities, and individuals work together. When everyone knows what should be done to prepare for a natural hazard, the consequences will be much less severe. Thanks to this disaster risk management approach and integrated risk transfer solutions like insurance, Mia and her community will be more resilient and can make sure that these natural hazards never turn into disasters.
Thank you, Karen. So even though the video might be a bit very cheerful, I think, when speaking about extreme weather events, it's still a good sort of introduction into integrated risk management and how the different phases can sort of catalyze action in the different areas. Now, with regards to the case study, we're looking at Ait Mayu, which is a municipality in Morocco. And as part of the case study, the team looked into some risks that the municipality, and particularly the agro-industrial production area that is based there, is exposed to. And being located at the edge of the Atlantic Ocean, there is a lot of risk coming from coastal flooding, which, combined with the fact that firstly, multiple agribusinesses covering both the fisheries sector as well as agriculture production are in the area. And as you can see on the slide, 93% of the country's MSMEs are based here, which generate around 46% of employment for Morocco. And secondly, given the fact that most of Morocco's agri-exports come from that region and contribute approximately 40% of the GDP, it can be seen as one of Morocco's climate vulnerable hotspots. And that was also why the government of Morocco was interested in looking into the role that climate risk management and insurance could play here. And it's also not only coastal flooding, which is a relevant climate risk here, but the businesses, depending on where they are based in that region, also suffer from heavy rains, which lead to flooding, either combined or in separation of coastal flooding. And also Morocco is generally a very, very dry area. It's also sudden and heavy heat waves, which lead to water stresses. And that water stress alone is already extremely severe, but then given with the fact that agro and fish processing industries are heavily water intensive, this climate induced water stress amplifies the impacts that we can see even more. And the climate impacts, in combination with the often more informal nature of the micro, small and medium-sized MSMEs enterprises in the area, which means they often lack protection, lead to impacts such as damages to buildings and loss of finished products from flooding, leads to disruption for supply chains due to damaged infrastructure such as roads, for example, or bridges in the area, as well as power cuts, which can, negatively affect business continuity. And we also see productivity losses simply because workers can't come to work or are not able to work because it's just, the heat is just too intense. And on the next slide, you can see the integrated risk management concept that Karen also already introduced. And with regards to the case study that we'll be looking at Morocco, we will be focusing on flooding. I would basically present a bit of the research and the findings that were made by the team with view to the preparation phase on the upper left, the residual risk phase, which comes after that, and then the preparation phase of this concept. And for the residual risk phase, it's important to note that it's equal, or this is equal to deciding or looking at risk retention instruments such as, for example, savings or budget reallocations on a governmental level or contingency funds on a governmental level, as well as at risk transfer measures. And now, if we begin looking at the case study at the next slide, which is the prevention phase, what happened from the outset is that the team took a much more wider approach than just focusing on MSMEs, but to look at the overall system within which the MSMEs are based and operated in. Because what was important was to better understand the national context and to do some analysis to see, for one, where an insurance product could actually fit in, and secondly, also how the work that is involved with the development and introduction of an insurance product could actually offer co-benefits for MSMEs and for resilience in the region, which go beyond financial payouts. And to do so, it was also important to not only involve the disaster risk management community on the ground, but to also involve the adaptation community, for one. And the other part was to really collect baseline data of where the region is at the moment, and how the existing measures may translate into gaps, how those gaps specifically affect MSMEs, and how the gaps could be addressed in context of developing and introducing an insurance product. And now if we look at sort of the first column up here, what the team found is that with a view to the legal financial institutional frameworks in the region, most of them favored post-disaster action, while there was also no clear sort of distribution of the responsibilities amongst the actors. There was no clarity exactly on who is doing what in terms of responding to extreme weather events, and who also can inform governmental bodies of the risks and impacts that MSMEs and communities are exposed to at a communal level. So that, for example, there could be additional measures that could be introduced to address those. And one of the benefits sort of that insurance could bring in that context is really the risk assessment part that is the key of not only the prevention phase, but also for the wider integrated risk management approach, because it allows you to really dissect the biophysical as well as social vulnerabilities that amplify the exposure to climate risks, in addition to natural sort of risks that you're exposed to. And risk assessment is one of the core functions of the insurance sector, which they really have acquired expertise in. And in trying to understand the risks as part of developing an insurance product, the information that is elicited in that process can also support the work of the disaster risk management and adaptation community to better understand what is already there and what is missing. And it is also sort of noted or recognized that the process of risk assessment itself also helps to increase awareness, risk awareness, amongst those who are being approached for the collection of data, such as, for example, MSMEs, as well as for decision makers and planning authorities. And another important element to consider, in addition to the softer, let's say, environment created by institutional and legal frameworks, was that the team also took a look at the physical environment in the region. And here, for example, they found that the insufficient maintenance of waterways and hydraulic installations led to problems with regards to drainage and overflowing and hence flooding for the MSMEs, because what the researchers found is that there was presence of vegetation and alien species in the riverbanks, which basically clogged or helped to sort of block water, block drainage, and then lead to flooding in the areas further down. And the gap that was identified regarding this issue was the fact that there had been, in fact, many studies done in the area on exposure, but they weren't really followed by implementation. And that, for one, also relates back to the issue made in the context of what I said before, of the above, that it wasn't entirely clear who would be responsible for making sure that the recommendations were also being implemented. And with regards to, again, how insurance could potentially help or catalyze a progress in that area, is the execution of a cost-benefit analysis, which one should or could do when deciding to introduce insurance and thinking of feasible coverage and premium levels. And what that means specifically is that you would quantify, I guess you're all aware of that, you would quantify the financial impacts of extreme weather events and the costs of relief and reconstruction efforts. And you would compare that with potential insurance premium costs. And when evaluating potential insurance premium costs, it's also important to look at how possible adaptation measures could bring down the costs for insurance, so that in the end, one could arrive at the conclusion that the combined costs of introducing insurance together with adaptation and prevention measures would be way below the combined costs of the financial impact of extreme weather events and relief and reconstruction efforts. So thinking about insurance would also help to make the economic case for implementing specific adaptation measures, which not only save lives, but which would also bring down the cost of insurance and hence provide a sound case for implementation, which might resonate well with planning or finance ministries in that context. On the next slide, we would now be looking at the residual risk phase and how residual risk is addressed through risk retention or transfer measures. Here in this context, the team looked specifically at risk transfer measures. And what they noticed is that the insurance sector in Morocco already offers a multi-risk climate insurance product, which targets the main cereal crops. But the gap that was identified in that context is that currently this product doesn't offer or doesn't include coverage for floods or flood damage or droughts. And it also doesn't cover MSMEs operating outside of the main cereal crop areas, so to speak. And hence, again, the co-benefit of introducing insurance in this context is for the insurance sector, the national insurance sector, to notice that there is a gap with regards to that, and to also act upon it, and to look into maybe broadening the insurance solutions that are out there, or broadening the coverage that is provided. And at the same time, and I think we can't see this entirely right now, but I can explain it to you moving on to the next column. At the same time, the team also noticed the absence of a nationwide compensation and insurance plan to help households constantly affected by flooding in the area and suffering losses from that, including MSMEs. And within that context, what was also looked at is that, or was also sort of identified, is that the insurance sector in Morocco mostly uses, as many other insurance sectors in other countries as well, mostly uses historical data and does not much consider the climate part of the risk, which is more future facing. And the co-benefit again of thinking about introducing insurance here is that when or by introducing such nationwide compensation and insurance plan, which also includes this climate related risk future facing modeling, the risk of financial consequences of extreme weather, which are currently shouldered entirely by households and governments, could be transferred to insurance companies, and thereby help to minimize the financial burden. And lastly, looking at the preparation phase on the next slide, the team also found that there, thank you, Karen, that there was a lack of national flood forecasting and warning system, and a related data gap, or gap in data quality and data amount, which would match with the emerging and current climate realities, is lacking. And here again, thinking about how insurance could help, the team wasn't thinking or wasn't looking at the insurance sector itself when it comes to sort of identifying this data, since the sector mainly and unfortunately still keeps this data private. But the team recommended that universities, research institutions, and NGOs could help to collect data and could help to develop new models, new forecasting and observation techniques, and thereby support sort of the development of accurate early warning systems, which could then help to inform such things as evacuation routes, and also help first responders to decrease the time they need to get to the affected population segments of people, and sort of reducing this time span is quite crucial for effective relief operations. There is, however, and this is sort of also shown in the next column, there is an existing alert that is sent by the government, mostly through national television networks. But the issue that the team saw with regards to MSMEs is that, well, MSMEs usually either work within or in factories, or micro businesses work on the streets, and these alerts often don't reach them in time. And one of the recommendations they made here is to develop an app which would warn of pending floods and provide information also based on the fact that most people either owning or working in MSMEs own a phone. And in connection to insurance, one benefit that the team saw is that this could also be linked to parametric insurance, as Jennifer sort of explained before, to help validate meteorological information and thereby also validate or transfer that information to the insurance provider, validate it with the insurance provider, and trigger a payout early on. And before I conclude on the next slide, I can also highlight two of the challenges that the team encountered when engaging with MSMEs in the area. So for one, MSMEs didn't really see the benefit of taking out insurance for something that they consider to be quite a low frequent risk, or a risk that comes with very low frequency, such as disastrous floods. However, they also had quite severe floods in 2009, 2010, 2012, and 2014. And what this sort of pointed to is that there potentially also is a lack of awareness amongst MSMEs of the frequency as well as the financial impacts of floods, and also a lack of awareness amongst municipal governments in the region of what they could do to actually prevent or limit the financial impacts of such events and the related business interruption. And one of the recommendations that was given in that regard was to involve particularly local NGOs, much more so than international organizations really, who have an in-depth understanding of the people in the region, in the area, and to make sure that their views and their needs are appropriately reflected in the product design process, so that the product actually also has value to the target group it's supposed to serve. Plus to also work together with these local NGOs to increase the understanding and awareness for climate risks and their financial implications, and how insurance could potentially, not always, help to address them. And the second challenge, which is also related to making sure that MSMEs are more aware of the potential benefits of insurance, is a lack of access to detailed information about MSMEs, or to also inform product development, basically. And that is something we see in several countries, that it's quite difficult to get information of MSMEs, because they often don't necessarily register as a company, because this comes with a tax burden and so on and so forth. So there is often a lack of sort of centralized, in-depth information on the operational nature of MSMEs. And one of the recommendations here included for national institutions to try and gather more insight into specific characteristics of their MSMEs, and to also think about potentially complementing the existing data they already have on their MSMEs when it comes to operational data, such as business size and so on and so forth, with geolocation data to learn more about their climate risk exposure, and to make that into a centralized database that could be accessed by disaster risk management, adaptation communities, and CDRFI practitioners to be used when trying to work through this integrated risk management approach. And with that, I would stop here. Thank you all for bearing with me. On the next and final slide, you can see a link to a toolbox on integrated risk management, which was developed by the team working on this, particularly by my colleague Kehinde, and it gives you a more in-depth guidance of how to use the approach in your own area of work. I think much of the sort of contextual information or examples that are given in the toolbox focus on the agricultural sector, simply because the team recognizes that this is, I mean, it is a key sector in several countries, and it is a sector that is contributing to lots of GDP and employment within vulnerable countries. So that would be of interest. And it's quite detailed, but it also should be structured in a way which allows you to easily navigate to your area of interest. So yeah, thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to try my best to answer them. And as I said, in case I can't, I'm happy to collect them and throw them back to Gaynde and then come back to you with answers after the webinar.
Thank you so much, Victoria. So I think we could take 2 questions if there are any. It seems you had a very good presentation and everyone understands. So we can move on to the final.
Sorry, there's one question from Janet.
Oh,
I'm sorry, Janet, that I didn't introduce that properly. MSMEs are micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. My apologies. I should have made that clearer from the start. So it's basically businesses of different sizes, depending on the different definitions of the countries that they have with regards to micro, small, and medium. And within the context of the case study, we looked at businesses or enterprises which are in the agro-processing sector in Morocco.
thank you very much for clarifying that. So now we could go ahead and move on to what's going on in our region. As I said, we are responsible for 3 countries, and this is just a look to see what is actually good, what exists in the 3 countries. So for Antigua, we have 4 acts that are in place or legislation that's in place that helps work on the area of climate disaster risk finance and insurance. While in Barbados, we only have 1 act. Sorry, so like we have 1 more question. So I know we're gonna wait till the end and then we'll have another question section and then we'll come back, okay? Thanks for your patience with us. And then in Grenada, there are 5 other processes and policies that are in place that deal with the climate risk and finance. So in all 3 countries, they're all members of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. They're all part of the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facilities and the CARICOM Regional Framework for Achieving Development, Resilience to Climate Change, and the Caribbean Regional Resilience Building Facilities. So we have access to these 4 agencies who are working towards building a resilient Caribbean region. In Antigua, there is a Sustainable Island Resources Framework Fund that provides low-interest loans to reinforce homes in disaster-vulnerable areas, and there are several civil society groups that are building the resiliency of their beneficiaries, setting up greenhouses and restoring water reservoirs. In Barbados, it is mainly the Caribbean Global Resilience Building Facility that is working towards a long-term resilience and climate-smart strategies, designing and implementing innovative policies and investment initiatives, and they're doing this with the EU, World Bank, and the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery. While in Grenada, somebody had asked earlier about the fisheries product. So there's a latest fisheries product coming out from the CRIF, and it looks at Grenada and St. Lucia and provides coverage for fisher folks and other players in the fisheries industry to enable them to recover quickly after weather-related events. And this is being funded by the US State Department. Sorry, this is a repeated slide, right? So then who are the main providers and products of insurance? We have the traditional insurance policies that cover earthquakes, hurricane, landslides, and fire. And then we have the CRIF, and then also in Grenada, as I just said, we have the coast as well. So since CRIF has been set up, they have made 41 payouts to 13 member countries, equaling $152 million US. And of the project countries that we're focusing on, so far Barbados got the most, and then Antigua got 1, but Grenada has not asked for a payout since CRIF has started or been established. And as I said before in the overview, this the climate disaster risk finance and insurance program are trying to make sure that they have a principled stand. They're looking at the pro-poor principles and the gender mainstreaming. So when we were asking when Elijah was doing the research, he said for the pro-poor principles, they weren't necessarily in touch with the vulnerable groups. But however, he believes that the stuff has incorporated gender issues and has a bit of gender mainstreaming. While in Barbados, they said no, they're not seeing any pro-poor principle being applied. And as well, they're not too sure about this gender mainstreaming being attached to the program. And Grenada said we're not seeing either pro-poor principles or gender mainstreaming. So who are the main stakeholders? It is going to be the government ministries and agencies, and for the private sector, the insurance agencies. Civil society gauge that their influence on this issue is non-existent to existent but limited. So they don't feel that they have a voice. So that's why we're trying to give a voice at this time. And they believe that it's a new concept in the Caribbean and we haven't actually worked in disaster response management for a while, or I shouldn't say for a while. They haven't been working in it as strongly as it could be because there's a need for more education, more inclusion of CSOs in disaster response management, and a free flow of information between government and private sector to CSOs, and from CSOs to government and private sectors. But the engagement and the structures to work, relevant CSOs have to be included more in the work of the organizers and the partners. So in turn that they can provide feedback to the membership bodies so that CSOs will be more involved. So at this point, we're going to pause for a little bit again to ask any questions. I know Anu asks, how would this impact a personal self-improvement, human development, education institutes? I don't know if you want to provide a little bit of clarity to your question, Anu Institute.
So I think, Karen, that the question related to how the integrated risk management concept or integrated risk management could impact a personal self-improvement, human development, or educational institution. I think generally for that, and also for me to answer that question appropriately, I would also need, I guess, to better understand what exactly that includes, operations, and in terms of. I think generally it would depend on what you look at, right? Whether you would look at, I guess, your institute itself, oh, I see, that is quite interesting. Okay, so you offer mental stress relief and disaster response among self-improvement services and health. Okay. So I'm not an expert in mental stress relief or resiliency support in terms of well-being for individuals. But I think with regards to how that could potentially, well, I think affect the kind of stress relief you would provide, it can help, I think, to provide a structure to advisory of what could be done, I guess, to have a plan, to have a list of steps of what to go through when trying to prepare for disaster and when trying to respond to it as well. And I think in more general terms, I think as an institution and you providing these services, it's also a question of for you to, I guess, reach the people you want to work with, how easy or hard that can be. If you had a hurricane or heavy rain coming to Antigua and Barbuda, whether there's anything potentially to anticipate in terms of risks, in terms of during the prevention phase when it comes to infrastructure that might be damaged, roads that might be damaged, that you as an institution to effectively reach those in needs, or vice versa, where it would affect your employees to come to work. I think it's a very, very interesting question, and I'm sorry that I can't provide in-depth answer from the top of my head right now, but I would also suggest that I can forward that question to my colleague, and then I'm happy to respond, maybe also even here on chat if the colleague responds to me in time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have any other questions, or we can move on to the next session? Okay, so for the last session, it's another break. It's another breakout room where we want you all to answer these questions. So if you could write them down quickly, I think Christian will put them in the chat as well. So what are the issues do we see in regard to climate risk and CDRFI in the Caribbean? How could these issues be addressed, and what would be our role in addressing these issues?
Sorry, Karen, what's the question for me?
No, it wasn't a question for you. We're going into the last set of breakout rooms.
Okay.
And the questions that we're going to be looking at in these last set of breakout rooms are: what are the issues do we see with regard to climate risk and CDRFI in the Caribbean? And how could these issues be addressed? And what could be our role in addressing these issues? I'm going to give you all 10 minutes.
No, I'm actually on a, I'm in a class.
Y'all could go ahead and move across to the rooms. All right, so we should all be back in the main room. I know we had to lose some participants because we're slightly over time. But if we could start hearing, and we just go with breakout room 1, that was Ariane, Janet, Saran, and Victoria.
Hello, good day. I'm Janet Simon. I will be presenting on behalf of Breakout Room 1. We looked at issues being risk assessment, education, especially the fact that there are different demographics, different individuals who comprehend information differently. So you can't take a single-minded approach to disseminating information. You have to ensure that it's dissected and it caters to different persons within society. And also the diversity of laws and codes. Enforcing these laws and codes becomes an issue. For example, here in Antigua, though we are one nation, some things may differ as it relates to codes between Antigua and Barbuda. And this goes for many other Caribbean islands, especially those who are twin island states. So these are things that we thought issues which would come by. And for us addressing these issues, and our role in doing so, one of the main things we looked at would have been the assistance by the NGOs in society for them to be able to assist the persons at the helm of these projects to ensure that the information and so forth reaches the individuals within the community, as they would be pretty much the bridge between the implementers of the program and the persons within the various communities.
Thank you so much. Can we hear from breakout room 2? That would be Calvin, Elijah, and Michael.
Sure. It can solely lie on the foot of the government, or does the citizen play some more invested part inside of it? Because ultimately, we know the cost. Somebody has to pay for it in terms of the coverage and being able to help to recover. So we looked at possible ways to address those issues, whether it be a situation where we look at the issue of maybe additional taxation regarding specifically climate and disaster financing, just like we address the issue of education and social security for the population. We also talked about potentially the idea of maybe a line of credit in terms of, instead of having government just giving out grant money, maybe, or international agencies trying to find maybe 300 million every time a disaster comes around, maybe having a fund where the government, where the people actually could, apply for a line of credit in the event that they were affected by a disaster and they pay it back with, very little interest or something, so that the funds could be available for someone in the future who might need it, again, down the road. So we kind of explored those roles in that regard. And basically, when we talk about the role, is basically who takes the burden of covering the cost for climate risk and disaster financing, because many on the ground in communities cannot really afford it out of their pocket if they had to pay for coverage. So we have to figure out, who pays for it.
Thank you so much for that contribution. So we have breakout room 3, Adolphus, Bernard, Candace, Nathan, and our new institute. Okay.
I was hoping that one of my other colleagues would do this. Can I?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, I think I'll ask my colleague Annual Institute to assist me here also. I think we are just 3 issues. We look at I think we want to risk disaster risk preparedness, and we discuss the idea of farmers. One of our colleagues mentioned that farmers has to primarily deal with what word to use. They can't do much in preparing because of the nature of what they do. So unlike person with disabilities that we said we define our role in Antigua and we lobby. However, we found that the agency, like the government agencies, they don't really engage us enough to include us in the disaster plan. So we have to be constantly lobbying to ensure that the risk is minimized to our members who are living here in Antigua and Barbuda when it comes to disaster. So we are more of lobbying to assist in the area.
Definitely, there's a need for inclusion. So I just want to thank, unless anyone else has any questions or questions to be asked for us to answer. We're going to wrap up here. I'm going to let you all know of a resource that we are building at the moment. So on our CPDC website, we have a resilience hub, and you can find more information about the project and as well as a library, so you can check it out. It's now being developed, so it may not have everything on it as yet. And I just want to thank you for your time with us today. Elijah is going to be sending around a short survey that is just going to ask you about what topics you would like to discuss in the next consultation. And we will definitely be in touch with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank
We'll
you.
be in touch.
All right, take care.
Thank you for having me. I was a bit in and out because I had to do a presentation of beds with Rotary Club to persons with disabilities, so I had to leave and I just returned. But one of my colleagues, my office has been in throughout the meeting, recording and taking notes. So we will be relooking some of the decisions and the suggestions.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks for the invitation, Elijah.
You're most welcome. Yeah, Thank you, Janet.
Thank you for the invitation. It was informative.
Thanks, Nathan.
Being here.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, bye.